I always say to entrepreneurs, right? An idea is not a business up until you've done something about it. Like we're saying, as long as you are thinking about something, there are thousands of other people thinking about the exact same
thing.
The execution may be different because your thought process might be very different. But never think that an idea is so unique to you that there's nobody thinking. So that's very important to be aware is number one. And then number two, like you've rightfully said, protect the idea. It is very simple. I always say to people, it is very simple for you to have your idea. Write it down. And if you really think the idea is unique to you, if you find information of how you can simply protect that idea, you write it down, you go to the lawyers, they will tell you and support you how to do it. And then you protect the idea, you patent it. Or to pay a very small amount of money, from as little as 750 pounds, you can protect and patent. You can start the protection journey.
You can start the protection journey so that either, I mean, a lot of people, you can even see, so simple, sometimes what people do, the example that you're talking about, if you want to start a website, for instance, and you go on the domain websites and the like, you realize you just got to pay a little bit of money and then they protect that domain for you for the year, and that's it. But somehow people don't extend that to the ideas that they get. And you're right, you know, ideas, one example I always give to people is there's so many ways to skin a cat. Right now, if we were doing this virtually, we could either use Zoom, Teams, 1,000 other WhatsApp. Yeah. All of them are still geared for the same audience, and the purpose is to have a virtual call. But the way they go about is all different. And they protected their ideas in such a way that you can then build a business based on it. But if you say to yourself, oh, I have this brilliant idea where people are going to talk virtually, guess what? There are 1,000 people who already have the same idea, but you don't have a business because it's an idea. So I like what you say. You don't have a business. An idea is not a business until you have protected it and you start scaling it up. So I think that's a big lesson for startups. And honestly, it's worth it because the amount sometimes is so minimal that you will find that the protection it accords you over the long term will negate any upfront payments you would have made, because then you realize that had I not protected this, then other people would have started the idea and gone away with it. So I think it's I mean, we can talk specifics at some point with any person in the audience who would love to talk about how I can protect the idea, where I can go. But you realize that in most African countries, you have your local trademark office that you can approach. Lawyers can help you draft the papers, and then you can lodge it, and then they approve it, and then you can protect your idea for some time. If you want to widen it, you can even go to a regional office, where we actually have one in Harare, where you can actually have your trademark on the regional platform, and you can protect your idea regionally. Of course, it costs you a bit more money. On the world stage, you can also do the same.
I'll give you an example. So when we worked on a project, right? I'm a founder of CheckUp Health. Patient-facing app.
Well, I'm your customer.
Clinical dashboard. Oh, that's good. Thank you so much.
Beautiful
Thank you so
platform.
much.
Yeah, and the app is amazing.
So the journey of that technology, the idea in me was born in 2004.
Wow.
When my father and my father-in-law died a week apart from undiagnosed diabetes. They were both known hypertensive patients. So I was so angry and I had this frustration, and I thought, oh my gosh, what can I do? But that idea from 2004, through a series of other events, I was in India on a business trip and I got sick in a hospital. And again, I needed care, but I didn't want to be admitted in a hospital. So when these people were able to create a team that came and turned my hospital room into my hotel room into a hospital room, that idea cemented. And that was years later, because I think that happened quite a few years later, maybe I think in 2014, 15, right? So first idea, 2004, 10 years later, that idea has been cooking and crystallizing. It is from that trip when I realized that, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. And for that week, when I'm in that bed, I'm writing notes on my notebook. This idea literally crystallized, like I was downloading it from somewhere. And so when I came back to England, we were already working on the NHS long-term plan. NHS is saying they're going digital. So all those things together, they crystallized my idea. And then we were working and building and creating the platform. Yet did we not patent it or protect it like we are discussing, but I was a seasoned business person, right? I'm just giving an example. But what we didn't do though is, what we did though is we had done the basic legal basis from the experience that I have as an entrepreneur. And then fast forward, we were just about to launch this platform in 2020, January, when the pandemic happened. Right, so the pandemic happens and then we have an opportunity. Black people are dying more than the white counterparts. There is this problem with COVID. Why are people dying? So I now connect that to 2004 when my parents died, and I'm thinking they are all chronic diabetes, hypertension. So what can I do? I have a platform, so what can I do? So we put an application to Innovate UK, and Innovate gives us the money, right? But guess what? On doing the application to Innovate, they wanted to know what work had we done to protect the idea. And guess what? That work that you do to protect the idea, imagine it adds value,
of course,
to your product, because that is the product.
That is the product. Yeah.
So I wanted to cement, and then I wanted to cement your point. And then on the funding allocated to us, they were actually allocating us funding to use. To submit a patent application towards protection. So that's how important that idea is, because if we had put an application and our idea is not protected, they would have been exposed to say, we could accuse them that they were stealing our idea. But how many digital platforms are out there right now, right?
A lot. There are really a lot. Yeah. I think any startup, I'm sure any startup who's interested in this world has probably watched an episode of Dragon's Den and Shark Tank and all those other platforms. And most of the dragons or the sharks, they always ask you this question: how have you protected this idea? Because an idea can be replicated.
Absolutely.
And if it's not protected, you can't sue anyone for starting the idea. So most people then, like we say, they look at this as the last thing they need to do, whereas it's actually the first thing they might actually need to do. So it's really almost like shifting our mindset, or can I say being mindful that when you're making a plan and you're scaling your idea, or your idea is crystallizing, don't negate or forget the legal function. Write it down as part of the pillars, because eventually you need to employ someone, even your co-founders. Between the two of you,
someone can steal
the idea and run with it. So you need to have an agreement between yourselves, which talks to how are you going to introduce a third party? What is the protection towards you? Who's putting what? Most people, and you see this with a lot of founders, they end up fighting because yes, we started this in the dorm and then we thought we were in this together, but then he looked for a third party to put money in, and then he decided it was his platform, or he thought about it first, or he's the one who approached the founder first, and people start fighting. So if you had an agreement in place, a shareholders agreement, you realize we didn't even have to fight over this. So I think I keep saying it's a pillar. The legal pillar, the legal function is a pillar. If you are building something, if you leave out a pillar in a critical part of that building can collapse.
Crash,
which is why I'm saying you need to be mindful of the legal pillar and function as you go along. And as you go along, you realize, okay, I'm glad I did this, I'm glad I did this, I'm glad I did. And that makes your business more attractive.
Exactly, and I was going to add that it makes everybody that looks at your venture or your business, the seriousness of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It shows that you are serious and it has a good foundation, and they have got clarity in terms of where they can start with you and how they can support you.
Yeah. And I think that probably would even speak to the issue, I think, around accessibility of information, legal information. So one of my pet peeves is that personally, I think the law, particularly in Zimbabwe, for instance, is really not accessible as one would like, particularly for startups. I think, like we've said, a lot of startups here in the UK and in Europe, the rest of Europe and America, do quite well because some of this information that they need is freely available.
Right.
If you go online, you could find an employment contract that speaks to UK law that you can simply download, change a few things, and voila, you have an employment contract. Whereas in Zen, it's sort of like you gotta crank out, you gotta find out what works, what doesn't work, and the like. So I think information is not as accessible or is not as friendly as you would want it to be,
And how can that be solved?
Well, I think you got to look at how the information, if you go on the websites, in quotes, that are relevant, you realize they really don't speak to a few factors that I think are important. One, in any conversation or in any a repository of information, you need to consider who is going to digest that information. So is your audience.
Who is it from?
And I find that most of these legal platforms are platforms made by lawyers for lawyers, or made by legally trained people for lawyers.
But not palatable to
not
the
palatable
person
to
who needs
exactly
the information.
to the startups who need the information. So it's not good enough, in my view, to say, well, we have this repository that is law cases. But unless someone synthesizes those law cases to find out what's relevant to startups, it's not going to be useful. And the startup is just going to spend hours and hours they can't afford to spend in trying to sift through the information.
Yeah.
Similarly, if startups want to draft contracts, you never know, for instance, is this relevant? Is this not relevant?
Yeah.
What have I left out? What is relevant to my market? So I think it's not good enough to just say, well, there is this platform called Zimli, for instance, where it's a repository of cases decided by the courts. It's not good enough. You need to synthesize that. So for our own bit, and it's something, like I said, it's a pet peeve, and what I've done about it, part of the solution is that my firm is preparing it's not the first, I guess, but it's really a good example of what you can do. We're preparing a startup pack for startups.
That's brilliant.
In Zim, which gives you links to free contracts, shareholders contracts that you can use, employment contracts that you can use, explains the law on startups, gives you access to all the laws that are relevant to your business as you're starting, things that you need to be aware of. And I think hopefully it will be as useful as it was useful to us when we're reading and researching on this.
That's brilliant.
And this will be freely available. We're not asking anyone to pay anything for it. And you also realize that this is something that we adopted from our law firm here in the UK, which was already available for free for startups in the UK and in Ireland. So it's a bit of localizing the information. So I think it's one way of doing it. The other way is, for not startups, but for charities and NGOs that work in that sector to also put funds towards setting up repositories like this for this information. Brilliant. So I look at it, for instance, one brilliant platform I really like is the uk.gov website.
Absolutely, I've said that as well.
That is ridiculously good. You want to know about citizenship rights. You want to know about what do I do with my old passport and my driver's license. You want to know about child health care. Can I leave my 10-year-old alone overnight?
Can I leave my snake at home alone?
Can I leave my snake at home? Can I, edit about pets, about dogs, about animals, anything you can. It's such a loaded report. And it's palatable. It's so easy to follow. There's so many links to it. I can imagine that building that platform takes a long time. Yeah. But I also feel that we have to be intentional in how we create this information. Yeah. So your audience, like I've said, it's important. If you're a legal aid company, or even if you're an NGO, say in the family law business, you're assisting mothers, or you're assisting children, you're talking about children's rights, youth's rights, women's rights, we'll have a repository of information that's easily accessible and palatable that people can access. And then if you can link this to the main ministries who deal with that, then you find you actually have a point of contact where people can simply click. We live in a digital age where it should be as easy as just clicking on a website to get all the information you want.
So that's a dream. That's
it is a dream, and it's a very realizable one, I believe. And I think it's something that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done somewhere. We just need to put some funds into it and do it. So yeah, those are sort of like the low-hanging fruits, so to speak, that I could find that we can utilize without spending too much money.